Good morning, everyone. This is the first session of the Bible and evolution. And we go straight off into the first session, Bible and evolution itself. Now, as far as the Roman Catholic Church is concerned, okay, we make a distinction between us, the Protestants, and the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church has long accepted evolutionary theory. In the 1950, in the encyclical Humani Generis, Pontiff means the Pope, Pius XII said that Catholic teachings on creation could coexist with evolutionary theory. So can be creation and can also be evolution going together. That is the 1950s. And then in 1996, we find Pope John Paul II went a little bit further and called evolution more than a hypothesis. So they are moving closer to accepting evolution as a fact of science. Pope Francis publicly affirmed that evolution is compatible with church teachings. That is in 2014. So as time goes on, you see that more people are receptive to the idea of evolution. So, taking a look at survey of people, what do people think? In 2009, there's this American research group that surveyed 1,000 20-year-old students who used to attend church regularly but stopped. And the survey had 74 questions to characterize the factors that led to their loss of faith or that led them to walk away from their faith, right? And this is what they came up with. If you don't believe the biblical accounts, the Bible, when did you first have doubts? So there's this listing here. High school, they first had doubts at 43%. 43%. Middle school, that would be 39%. College is 10%. Primary school, 4%. And those who are not sure, they don't know, only 1%. Then they ask, which of these make you question the Bible the most? So you have these on miracles not true, 4%. How do they know miracles not true? Well, don't know what evidence they use. Bibles does not make sense. 10% say Bible doesn't make sense. Creation, they don't believe in creation anymore. 11%. Those who say the Bible has too many rules, 14%. And there are those that say earth not young earth, right? Not a young earth. It's a 29, almost 30%. And those that say none is 25%. So key findings, when you add up middle school and high school, that means secondary school, basically. Okay, and JC, 83%, which is quite a high percentage. And most people doubt the age of the earth. Yeah, because they think that it's not what the Bible gives us, the idea of a young earth, just a few thousand years old. All right, but the thing of concern you can see is that even as young as secondary school, already their faith is being challenged and eroded by the surroundings that they find themselves in. So it's not very different anywhere else. For example, Singapore, when children go to secondary school and JC, that's the time when they will be challenged with their faith. So if they're not firmly rooted and grounded, this is where they start shaking. Okay, and then they go to university, there will be another 10% that will be challenged. What about Australia? Faith and belief in Australia defined. You find that actually it's quite a messy situation. First of all, there are people who are spiritual, but they are not religious. Okay, so they are spiritual, but they don't believe, they don't have a religion. It's quite strange because how do you be spiritual and yet not have religion. So there's an ultimate purpose and meaning. 36% believe that. So if there's no God to them, then how do they have a purpose and meaning? So I think people kind of like have all kinds of confusing understanding. And then for 26%, that is an inward journey of self-discovery. Yeah, so that's what spiritual is, just self-discovery. Those who have mixture of religious beliefs, so they mix religions, 22%. Those who say they have no religion is 49%, almost half, say they prefer science and evidence-based. You see, to them, Bible is not evidence-based and not scientific enough. So 50%, yeah, about that. Religion is a crutch for the weak. So they think it's weak people who have religion, 18%. And there are those that think religion is outdated and traditional, so no longer relevant, 14%. Yeah, and Australians identifying with no religion is growing. From 100 years ago in 1911, just 0.4%. But 100 years later in 2011, you have 22% who have no religion, right? So you can see that in 100 years, it's a lot of people are losing faith. Those who talk about Christianity, less spirituality, you have churchgoer at least 1 month, at least once a month, 15% do that. And an active practitioners, extremely involved, only 7%. Okay, so 45% is Christianity, less spirituality. I guess it means not committed to it. So in total, you have 59% total Christianity, right? In 2017, you have 59%, and in 2011, you had 61%. So in the matter of 6 years, 2% attrition, okay, 2% attrition. And somebody says something which is quite common. I was brought up Christian. I just don't identify with a religion anymore. So this is where faith in God has been dropping. What about public views about human evolution in America? See here, 32% say evolution due to natural processes. So almost 1/3 of US, yeah, they believe in evolution. And then 24% supreme being guided evolution. And then that's this almost 1/4 say that evolution took place, but with God guiding evolution. 4% say don't know or they are confused. So out of this, basically it's 60% says evolved over time. Humans have evolved over time. And 33, but 1/3 say humans existed in the present form since beginning. And those who don't know or refuse to say is 7%. So you can see that those who have faith in the Bible, what the Bible says, it's slowly decreasing. And even among those who are Christians, there can be more and more people supporting evolution. Now, most Americans say science and religion conflict. So you cannot have science and religion together because they don't agree. But fewer say their own beliefs conflict with science. Yeah. So question, generally, do you think science and religion are often in conflict? 59% say yes. And 38% says it's compatible. Does science sometimes conflict with your own? Okay, that one was generally your own religious beliefs, and you have 30% who say yes, they struggle with conflict in their religious beliefs. 68 say does not conflict. Bear in mind, this would be both Christians and non-Christians. Okay, So 30% conflicts, likely majority or maybe all are Christians, because usually it's a problem with the Bible. Most are least religiously observant. Okay, so those who are not very regular, okay, or not very committed, they are most likely to say science and religion are often in conflict. So this is US again, right? Adults who say science and religion are often in conflict. Among those who attend religious services, at least weekly, so those who go to church maybe, or whatever religion they practice, 50% says there's a conflict of science and religion. Those who go monthly or yearly, so not so regular, okay, 54%, once a month or once a year, 54% say conflict. Those who say seldom or never, 73%, okay. I guess because they don't know their religion enough to really know whether it conflicts or not. Okay, so looks like those who go weekly, 50%, half of the people actually believe that science and religion conflict. Look at Singapore, but Singapore, we don't break down so specifically on the evolution and all that stuff, just religions in general. So this religions among the population, resident population in Singapore, and that is age 15 years and older. And that was a 2020 census, the most recent one that I could get, found that younger people are more likely to have no religious affiliation. So more and more young people have no religion. Yeah. So this guy, Matthew Matthews, Principal Research Fellow, said that the increasing number of people without religion is expected. Is expected because it is the trend that is seen in many societies where people shift away from organized religion. Yeah, so in societies, more and more young people are moving away from organized religion because they become more entrenched in a secular world. And people rely less on religion. Okay, so fewer people have faith to provide them an explanation for the many things that happen in life, but they look to the sciences instead. So this is a general statement, and in Singapore, Christianity is 2010, Christianity was 18.3%. In 10 years, 2020, Christianity was 18.9%. So increased by 0.6% in 10 years. But more and more, you can see that no religion from 17% grew to 20%. Okay, so let's look at Christians. Okay, let's look at Christians and see what happens to Christians in their faith. Okay, we look at this example, this man called Charles Templeton, right? And together with others, he founded the Youth for Christ organization in 1946. So this was a committed Christian and very committed and active. Then Billy Graham was hired for Youth for Christ as the first full-time evangelist. So together with Billy Graham, these people, Youth for Christ, right? The founder, Charles Templeton, they started the evangelistic movement and they held crusades to many countries. And Billy Graham also came to Singapore. So for Charles Templeton to further his understanding of the Bible, he went to attend Princeton Theological Seminary. By then, it had become a secular theological seminary. Secular means they are not necessarily very Christian-based. Yeah, so it's kind of like weird because theological, you would think it must be led by committed Christians, but by that time it was secular. So you can see that even the Bible schools, okay? Seminary, the Bible schools, even the Bible schools themselves, their commitment dropped so that it became secular. And then Charles Templeton was taught that there are doubtful statements and scientific contradictions in the Bible, including things like, the truth is evolution, not creation, and there's no geological evidence for global flood. Okay, so no evidence that there was a Noah's flood taking place. So he was there in Bible school, and they taught him, ironically, Bible school taught him Bible is wrong and all these things. So in 1949, 3 years later, he brought this up to Billy Graham, and Billy Graham confessed in his biography that he had no answer. So Billy Graham also could not answer this conflict between what people say about evolution and creation. And eventually, it led to Charles Templeton's disbelief in the Genesis story. And eventually, he also stopped believing in the Bible. Subsequently, Billy Graham also did not believe the Genesis account as literal. Yeah, so it affected, you see, Charles Templeton, it affected Billy Graham, and then Charles Templeton accepted theistic evolution. Theistic evolution means God created the world, but he let it evolve. Yeah, so God created the world, but didn't create everything. Okay, God just let everything work by evolution. And finally, Charles Templeton believed that all faiths lead to the same God. So that means Jesus is not the only way, truth, and life anymore. So this is an example of how, when people believe in God but are not strong in their faith, okay, things in the Bible are slowly being eroded, slowly taking away their faith because they are exposed to all these things, including committed Christians like Charles Templeton. And Billy Graham was also affected in some way. Yeah, so this is how it's very important to be sure that not just young people, but even these people who are much older, yeah, they're actually in the evangelism sector, and their faith can also be lost. And so he wrote this book, Farewell to God, My Reasons for Rejecting the Christian Faith. And it's quite sad because you go internet and you read about Charles Templeton, you find that towards his older days, yeah, he says he missed Christ, but then he's no longer a Christian. Yeah, so he had a relationship with Christ younger days, then he lost his faith. And when he was an old man, he said he kind of like lost a friend. Yeah, so Jesus was important, but Jesus was no longer what he believed in the earlier years. So let's talk about how the theory of evolution started. And we look at something very short and basic today. Briefly, Charles Darwin studied wildlife while on a voyage, and he noticed the variation in the appearance of the individual animals. So he saw that animals, there are different kinds, even within the same kind, different species, different types. Yeah, variation in the same kind of animals. And he guessed that this variation, given enough time, would allow these animals to change to the point that they looked different. Yes, so this is the beginning for Charles Darwin, but it's not a surprising discovery in actual fact, because anyone can examine different varieties of roses or cats to see this, right? You can have all the different species of cats, different kinds of cats. And this process of changing an organism's appearance, so any animal or any living thing, the appearance can change through a series of small changes. And it is correctly called microevolution. Okay, microevolution with an I, and it is not what we are talking about when we refer to the theory of evolution. Okay, this big concept of evolution is not what we're talking about where this is concerned, because these little changes, they are micro. Okay, so Darwin actually observed, for example, finches, a kind of bird, and you can see that they look different and their big structure, okay, is also very different. But then after a series of microevolutionary changes, a frog or a finch may be larger or may change in color or may have certain features that are different, but it is still a frog, still a finch, not a fish, not a lizard. It doesn't become a different kind of animal. So that is what the major evolution is about, become a different kind of animal. So for quick reference, yeah, microevolution with an I refers to gradual changes within one kind of animal. For example, over generations of dogs. So you can have different sorts of dog animals, mammals, dogs, dog family, right? But with all these changes, they are still dog. So there is microevolution. Then you have macroevolution with an A. And this refers to gradual change from one kind of animal to another. So it's not just dog become another dog with a different appearance and so on, but it's actually one kind of animal to another. Example, from a fish to an amphibian to a reptile. So macroevolution is where a kind of animal, for example, marine animal like a fish, it can evolve and change totally into something different, like a reptile. A reptile can change totally into something different, become a mammal. A mammal can change totally, become different, become a human being in the end. So that is macroevolution, the bigger scale of change. So what is evolution? Well, they have a lot of things to say about evolution. So I just took 4 snippets of description of evolution. Evolution, which means change over time. Okay, evolve, change over time, is the process by which modern organisms have changed from ancient organisms. So there's this picture, a gibbon changes into an orangutan, changes into a chimpanzee, changes into a gorilla, and changes into a man. So I wonder how come there are still gibbons, orangutans, chimpanzees, and gorillas around if they change to men. Well, let's go on to the next one, evolution. In evolution, in biology, evolution is the change in the characteristics of the species. So one kind of animal, there are certain things that change the characteristics, and they change over several generations, and it relies on the process of natural selection. Okay. The theory of evolution is based on the idea that all species are related. So all the kinds of animals, they are somehow ancestor or descendant, they're all related, and they gradually change over time. So give enough time, they will become a different kind of animal. Evolution relies on there being genetic variation in a population, which affects the physical characteristics called a phenotype of an organism. Okay, so there's a genetic variation. So in one kind of animal, that the genes, there are different things happening in the gene. It will affect how they look like or certain things about their appearance, and then after that, in time, they will change. So according to this development of evolutionary theory, Darwin reasoned that adaptations result from natural selection, and then finally it will lead to evolution, a change into a different kind of animal. And evolution is the process by which living things change and diversify. They become different animal over time. Okay, this one, diversify, is actually very general. Yeah, even if dog become a different kind of dog, is still diversified. So this can be used for microevolution. Okay, so you will see that their explanation for evolution is quite vague, all right, because it can include microevolution, but then they do something tricky, which we'll talk about later. Here's another slide, same series, development of evolutionary theory. So whoever came up with this said these ideas were widely challenged until a tremendous amount of evidence was gathered to support evolution. So this is the way when you read articles supporting evolution, this is the kind of way they will talk. Yeah, they will say there's a tremendous amount of evidence. Yeah, tremendous amount of evidence to support evolution. Yeah, so they will use very convincing words, right? Like tremendous amount of evidence. As we go on, and some of the things they say, we will see them talking in this way. And so now they say the theory of evolution is the cornerstone of biology. Okay, so to them, everything about life depends on evolution, cornerstone. Okay, let's talk a little bit about natural selection according to this explanation. Individuals with characteristics best suited to their environment are more likely to survive. Okay, so if you have webbed feet, for example, then you can survive in water. That's an example. Best suited in their environment, they can likely to survive. Then they can find food, and they can avoid predators and resist disease. And these individuals are more likely to reproduce, so they can survive better and pass their genes on to their children. So basically, survival of the fittest. That's what they're saying. Okay, those that are fit, they have certain features that help them to survive. They are fit enough, then they will be able to produce next generation. And so as a consequence, these individuals most suited to their environment, they survive, and given enough time, the species will gradually evolve. Okay, so you'll see that the definition is actually very general. Yes, and what they do is they explain that the species will gradually evolve, which in a certain degree we can accept because these are what we call adaptations. Yeah, they are changes to adapt to their environment, but this is microevolution. That means for us, they stay the same kind of animal. A dog will still remain a dog even though it's a wild dog. Okay, and any other kind of animal, they adapt to their environment, but they are still that animal. So microevolution for us. But for evolutionists, they will take this into a big leap that the species will gradually evolve and become a different kind of animal. So it's a big leap into macroevolution. Okay, you see that their definition is actually very general, but from general, they can suddenly jump across the big drain and cause it to become macroevolution. And then they call this evidence of evolution. Okay, evidence of evolution. And direct observation. So you see, evidence, to them, this is scientific. Direct observation, we have seen evolution occur in cases like, so these are 3 examples. The study of finches in the Galapagos Islands, right? So one group is 3 finches. How this is a vegetarian finch, yes, versus a finch that becomes insect eating. Yeah, so vegetarian will eat just the fruits and basically plant life, but they evolve according to this evolution. They evolve and they start eating other animals like insects. So this is an example to them of observation of evolution taking place. Yeah, and then they talk about bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics. And that's quite common to us today. Yeah, scientists, doctors tell us, don't, when you take your antibiotics, make sure you finish your whole course. Otherwise, the bacteria becomes resistant and your antibiotics will not work. So this is an example of, again, direct observation of evidence of evolution. And insects that become resistant to pesticides. Okay, so whether your plants, your crops, you spray in pesticides and insects gradually become resistant to them and they don't die, that is called evolution to the evolutionists. And this is an example of how evolutionists pull the wool over ignorant or unwary people's eyes. So they can trick people who don't know or people who are not very careful. What they are doing is actually quoting instances or examples of microevolution. This is microevolution. And then they leave your imagination to take that deceptive leap. And it's a leap of so-called logic. Yeah, but actually it's a leap of nothing. Leap of faith, if you want to call it. Okay, it's a deceptive leap into concluding, since these changes take place, then they will let you take the imagination that it jumps and results into macroevolution. The change of species, the change of animal from a bird to some other animal, and they call it evidence of evolution of species. Yeah, whereas bacteria that becomes resistant to antibiotics is still bacteria. It hasn't become a worm. Yeah, but they give you the impression that they will change, and they use the term evolution. So they are quite deceptive in the way they explain evolution. The fact is, developmental changes within the same species of animal, okay, so those things that change, same kind of animal, is not what evolutionists mean when they talk about evolution. So for example, one kind of dog evolves into another species of dog. That's not what they're talking about, okay? And you have all the different kinds of moths that evolve, right? But they're still moths. That's not what they're talking about when they say evolution. I mean, that is a subset. That is the leap they use to make you think they're talking about evolution, but it's actually micro. And from there, they will jump into macro later on and leave you confused. So all these kind of things, like genetics, first generation, you can see that this kind of beetle is both sides green, and one of the genes is green, one is this lighter color. So they produce offspring. Second generation, you can have all these variations. But if all 4 have green genes, so to say, then their children will all have green genes. Yeah. If each of them has got one green and one light gene, one green and one light gene, then these are the variations that they can produce. Okay. So this is microevolution. Evolutionists they can talk about microevolution as evolution in general, but from here they will suddenly jump into macro. Okay, so be very careful in understanding what people say when they're talking about evolution. Basically, what picture form, microevolution is man can change but will still be man. Yeah, man will still give birth to human babies and grow into men. Dog will still become dog or give birth, reproduce their own kind of dog, even though the own kind of dog may look different, right? May have certain behaviors or characteristics that are different, but they're still dog. Bird will still be bird and so on. But for the other evolution, which is macro, okay, different from micro. Macroevolution is where simple organisms like an amoeba can evolve into a fish, can evolve into a frog, can evolve into a reptile, can evolve into a bird, can evolve into a mammal, can evolve into a human being. Okay, so they make a distinction between the two things, microevolution, which is consistent with creation, and macroevolution, which is animals changing into something totally different. Okay, so how did evolution spread? How did evolution become widespread and a lot of people start believing it's through books that promote evolution? And since Darwin's time, the theory of evolution developed through people writing books. So reading books is good in one way, but reading books, wrong kind of books, books is one good way to spread information and teaching. But nothing dug out of the ground or discovered anywhere else has ever supported this theory of evolution. Now, how they work? Books that promote evolution, typically they contain two things. Okay, what is typical? There are two main things. First, you have artist drawings that show the ages and names of layers of the earth. Okay, so they'll draw the earth, geology, they draw the layers of the earth, and they'll tell you that this is what age to what age, and there's a name for it. Then you have another thing is the artist drawings showing plants and animals arranged in a family tree. So they will say this is how these things are related, how they produce the next kind of animal. But these pictures are not evidence. Okay, pictures are pictures, they are not evidence. Printing them for more than 100 years does not change that either. Anyone can make up a whole table, draw a picture, propose a theory, but that does not prove the theory is correct. And so it's the same thing for theory of evolution. They use drawings and pictures. What is true is the book supporting evolution, they provide much more than information than the two pictures. Okay, so besides the pictures, they will say something to convince you. But they will use the foundation of these pictures to apply the facts in their books to the theory of evolution model. So they will use their pictures, they'll use some facts of science put inside, and they will combine the two to come up to explain their theory of evolution. Okay, they use the pictures that they draw, these drawings, they use some facts from science, and they combine the two to explain theory of evolution. So here's an example. And this is the tree of life, or a phylogenetic tree. And it's something similar to what you would find in a science textbook. Okay, a school textbook or biology textbook about how life came about. And it's meant to show visually how simple life evolved from the very basic, like, for example, an amoeba, according to Darwin's theory of natural selection. This will evolve into plants, will evolve into animals, and will evolve into human beings that we see today. Okay, so this is one of the things that they will have. They will have a phylogenetic tree or a tree of life. And they will tell you this is how all the living things came about. One example, the variations we see today in horses, okay, could add up over time. So one generation after another generation, many generations, will allow some of these horses to change to the point that they are no longer horses. Scientists call this process of developing new life forms from existing but different life forms macroevolution. So with an A, okay? So an animal, which is an ancestor of the horse, over time, you can see it's supposed to be very small, and then it will develop and so-called evolve over time to become a modern horse that is so different in size. Yeah, and you can also see that it looks a little bit different in certain ways. Okay, but they will tell you this is how evolution takes place. But then after that, from there, the horse can suddenly evolve into maybe an elephant or something like that. That is macroevolution. Okay, to make it more convincing, they have three great geological eras. The Paleozoic. So these are all very familiar when you look at all the dinosaur movies nowadays. The Paleozoic era, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic, and is characterized by distinct groups of fossils. So you can see they draw a very complicated diagram, pictures, okay? Down here, this picture, wow, fantastic. They start you off with the Big Bang. Big Bang 12 billion years ago. It depends on the textbook. Some will tell you 12 billion, some will say 14 billion, some will say 15 billion, but it's billion lah, okay? So the number may be different, the number of billion may be different, but it's basically still billions. So they will say everything started with a Big Bang, and then there was this evolution, ancestral supernovation, and then after that, the solar system started to form 4.6 billion years ago from the Big Bang, okay? And then over time, 3.9 billion years, and then it will start evolving all the way until all these things come up. Okay, so this complicated diagram simplify into something like this on the right-hand corner. Okay, rather than something so complicated, just make it like that. So here's the same picture enlarged, and it's called the geologic column. And all these layers, all right, all these layers represent millions of years, right? So it's not just years, but millions of years. And they tell you in this diagram, Earth forms 4.6 billion years ago. And so all these are the 2.5 and so on million years ago. And these are the fossils that they associate with the geologic age of their existence or their evolution. So science textbooks, they would have us believe that the geologic column was created by geologists, scientists who study the Earth, okay, and specifically the layers of the Earth, of planet Earth, who they have examined the evidence and then they constructed a model of their findings. So that's what science textbooks make us believe. Okay, they publish all these as if it is scientifically proven. But no, sorry. Would you be surprised to know that the geologic, this is what somebody actually discovered and talked about, okay? This is not true. Just now what we said, that geologists have examined the evidence and then from there, they constructed a model of their findings. So there's a person who actually discovered, nope, that's not true. Because you see, the geologic column was created in the mid-1800s, before there was any dating method. Okay, so this column was created before people started dating. So it was created without dates. And a group of people just came up with a number of layers of rock, and they gave each layer a name, like for example, Jurassic. So you have your Jurassic Park, the dinosaur age and so on. They gave it an arbitrary age. Okay, so Jurassic age will be this period to this period. And then they create an index fossil. Okay, index fossil to identify that layer. So the index fossil is a fossil that every time you find it is supposed to help you know that, oh, this layer is Jurassic layer. Sounds really scientific, right? But the interesting thing is, once dating methods were developed, none of these assigned dates changed. Yeah, none of these assigned dates changed after dating methods were developed. So what they're saying is, the people who came up with all these things, right, they are correct even before people learn to date all these things. So that means, in other words, for those people who invented dating methods, they just simply copied all these details as if these details were scientifically proven, but there was no dating committed to these scientifically. So with a dating method, they just attach the dates to all these things. A brief aside here about radiometric dating methods. They have also been proven unreliable when dating things that we know the age of. And yet scientists trust them to determine accurately the age of things we don't know the age of. Okay, so here is the flaw or the big problem. Yeah, they just copied everything and then they attach a date to it. But even then, the dating methods, they have not been very accurate. And with the things that we know the age of. So even when they dated recent things, recent times, we know the age, but they dated wrongly still. So how can we know that they will date these, which we don't know the age? Huh? How would we be convinced that they are dated correctly if the things that we know, they already date wrongly? Yeah, so this is a major problem with the geologic column, which everybody takes for granted as scientifically proven and true. Some more geologic column. Okay, so here's another way of putting it. Okay, so these numbers are supposed to be millions of years. Huh? In fact, 80 to 85% of the Earth's surface does not have even 3 geologic periods appearing in the correct consecutive order. So you see, this is a very high percentage of the Earth's surface, where all these supposedly geologic periods, they're not in the correct order, and they're not consecutively correct according to the geologic column. And in many places, you'll find the geologic periods in the wrong order. So these are problems you see that for us as laymen, as common people, these are things that we don't know, but they carry on teaching, they carry on as if everything is all correct. Now, if the geologic column did exist in one place, it has been estimated that it would be about 100 miles thick. And in actual fact, the Earth's crust is at most 30 miles thick. So where did the extra 70 miles go to? Or where would they come from, rather? Okay, so here is an example of the geologic age in a table form, right? And if you were to find them, one secular earth science textbook states, if there was a column of sediments deposited continuously, so or in this order, okay, since the formation of the Earth, the entire history of the planet could be reconstructed. So there's this is saying that if there's one place on planet Earth where you can find all these layers, geologic age layers, if you can find all this together, okay, in the correct order, we will be able to study the formation of the Earth correctly. The entire history of the planet could be reconstructed. But unfortunately, no such column exists. So this thing here, all right, where they say that this is the geologic period with all these names and ages, okay, the actual fact is to have these things all occur together, it would take 100 miles of thickness, okay? But then the Earth's crust doesn't even have enough. It's only 30 miles thick. So this tells us that this one doesn't make sense, or is not that it doesn't make sense, is not correct. Yeah, it's not scientifically confirmed. So it is still the imagination and what the people say, and then the common people like us that we read and we believe, but we are actually believing nothing correct. It's not being confirmed by science. It's just what people tell us to believe. What about fossil record? The fossil reveals the existence of species that have become extinct or have evolved into other species. Okay, now the first part of this is correct, but the second part is where they lead us into believing something not correct. So that was what I said just now. Yeah, earlier on the slide, I said that they start off with a picture, they introduce some scientific fact, and they combine the two to go and teach and lead us into believing something else about their evolution, which is not correct. Yeah, so what is correct here is existence of species. The fossils show us that these species, these animals, or these types of life forms, they have existed, okay? And they have become extinct, many of them, yeah? But then this is where they add on their evolution story or have evolved into other species. So this is, they take facts, they tag on the facts into their evolution teaching. And this is where, if we are not aware, then we swallow the lie. The fossil record shows these important facts. 99% of all organisms now extinct. The radioactive dating and half-life, we know that Earth is about 4.6 billion years ago. So this is where they start combining this into their evolution theory, right? And then this kind of cells are the oldest fossils and the first organisms to develop on Earth. And then they tell you transitional fossils that link older extinct fossils to modern species. So this part here is a dangerous one because this is where microevolution, which is true, there are some transitional fossils that are microevolution, so within the same kind of animals, yeah, that link older extinct fossils to modern species is where they cause us to make that leap of deception or leap of faith into believing that these animals, they transit in their changes to become modern species and different kinds of animals. So evolutionists talk about transitional fossils, but they have actually not produced adequate fossils that show the developmental stages where these animals have evolved into other species. They do not show us adequate fossils. They tell us they are transitional fossils. And then to convince us, they draw a tree of life, or just now I said phylogenetic tree instead, and then they tell you this is where this kind of animal evolved into this kind of animal. And the transitional fossils they give us actually don't support that this animal changes into that animal. It just shows a little bit of difference, but not close enough to the new animal that they're supposed to evolve into. So we will explore that one example next session. So basically, the fossils are not consistent with the idea of evolution. Because you see, for one animal type to evolve into a different type of animal, there needs to be innumerable transitional forms. Yeah, there needs to be a lot, as whatever this animal is. For example, if people say ape, yeah, if ape is supposed to evolve into human being, there in the evolution process, there must be many what we call transitional stages, transitional forms that show a transit, a change from certain features, certain characteristics must change into the next generation. This generation, certain things must change into the next generation. This generation, certain things must change to the next generation before it finally becomes changed to man. So a lot of transitional forms, many are expected. But the fossils show that all these transitional forms are missing. You see, even within a human being itself, from one young man to an old man, there are many changes, but you still remain a man. Yeah, but for them, they will just give you 1, 2, and then after that, from the 2, they will leap into a new animal, or 3, and then they leap into a new animal. So the fossils are not consistent with the idea of evolution at all. So let's talk about fossil dating. Just now we talked about radiometric dating. One textbook we have says, this is American textbook, but you will see in biology textbooks as well. It's not just in America. The layers of rock can be dated by the types of fossils they contain. Okay, so what they're saying is, you find a layer of rock, you find the fossil, use that fossil, you say, okay, this is where that rock is dated. Then on the very next page, it says, scientists have determined the relative times of organisms from the locations of their fossils in sedimentary rock layers. Question, did you catch that? They use a lot of smoke and they use different words to say. But what they're saying is, down here, the fossils you find will tell you the date of the rocks that the fossils are in. Down here, they tell you the opposite. That is to say, the rocks you find, you will know the age from the fossils inside them. So if you think carefully, they are actually bluffing you. Okay, what they're saying is something called circular reasoning. Okay, the layer is dated by the fossils. And then the other one, they tell you the fossils are dated by the layer. Okay, do you see how they are actually doing something called circular reasoning? Okay, this is a quote from the American Journal of Science in 1976. The intelligent layman has long suspected circular reasoning in the use of rocks to date fossils, and then they use fossils to date rocks. Okay, so they use the rocks to date the fossil, and then after that, they will use the fossil to date the rock. The geologist has never bothered to think of a good reply. They don't know how to reply. Okay, because they are not the ones that create, nowadays they are not the ones that created this nonsensical circular reasoning. So they don't take responsibility to reply. They feel that the explanations are not worth the trouble as long as the work brings results. Even the Encyclopedia Britannica says, it cannot be denied that from a strictly philosophical standpoint, Geologists are here arguing in a circle. That's why it's called circular reasoning. The succession of organisms means the animal or the creature has been determined by a study of their remains from the rock they are in. And the relative ages of the rocks are determined by the remains of fossils that they contain. So the fossil date the rock and the rock date the fossil. That's what they're saying. How can you use each one to date each other? Yeah, so that is circular reasoning, and it is not science. But then as long as you believe what they tell you, they don't care whether it's science or not. Here's an example of the tree of life, or the phylogenetic tree. You can see it's very complex. Wow, so many things until have to put it so small to teach evolution of species. So from the origin of life, you see this tiny little beginning at the bottom. Yeah, okay. So they can create this whole evolution of all the different plants and animals in the world. And they can create many diagrams. Like just now I said, they draw pictures. Yeah, they draw pictures. They create diagrams of such a tree of life meant to show the evidence of evolution. So this is evidence. Okay, just draw some pictures. But then if you look at it carefully and think about it, there's one critical significant problem. And the significant problem is the tree always shows the transition from one species to another. Okay. It never shows the transitional stages within one species that so-called evolves into another life form. Okay, so basically what we're saying here is that they will tell you, okay, this one, it changed into this animal changed into that animal changed into that animal, this animal changed into that, and all the different kinds of animals. Okay, they will show you all the different animals that supposedly change, but they will never show you transitional stages. But then you say, oh yeah, but that would be too complicated. They just want to show you all the animals that change. So all the transitional stages, another diagram lah. But even the same thing applies. There are pictures of evolution of ape men into men. Okay, so you can have a whole picture just on this. All right, just a whole picture on this part here, enlarge it. All right, of how an ape or how some kind of simian form of life will evolve into a human being, but it's all pictures. No fossil evidence of the stages of transitional evolution. So you can have these pictures, right? A little monkey here that supposedly evolves into a human being here, okay? And then suddenly the human being starts using computer. They can draw you all these pictures, but in terms of fossils, they cannot provide you all the intermediate stages of transition. No fossils. Okay, so it's all pictures to convince you. And then they call it evidence of evolution. Okay, and that's where they use paleontological evidences. Study of fossils is called paleontology. Okay, so this big name just means studying fossils. Fossils are remains, wrong spelling of whoever prepared this. Fossils are remains of hard parts of life forms found in rocks. So they are actually the remains of a dead animal. They harden and they become rocks over time. Different aged rock sediments contain fossils of different life forms who probably died during the formation of the particular sediment. Some of them appear similar to modern organisms. They represent extinct organisms. So they may look like something modern today, but they are extinct. Example, dinosaurs. A study of fossils in different sedimentary layers. Just now we talked about the geologic layers. Okay, the fossils in different sedimentary layers indicates the geological period in which they existed. So you see, they just say it so simply. They don't tell you the circular reasoning that this fossil date the rock date the fossil. They don't tell you all that. They just teach you that the fossils in the different layers, the rocks, indicate the geological age that they exist, showing that life forms vary over time because the geologic rocks layers have different fossils, different animals. And all this is called paleontological evidence, right? So it simplifies everything to just say that you know the fossils from the rocks that they are found in, but behind that, how the dating takes place and whether the dating or the layers are correct, the layers of rocks are correct, they don't have to explain that. Yeah, but they just tell you, and you have to read and discover from digging and reading a lot more to find that, oh, that one doesn't make sense. Then this one is when you will start questioning this. But if you read this by itself, you won't even know all those stuff. So the evidence of fossils is evidence that the different life forms existed in the past. This one we know is a basic fact lah. If you find a fossil inside there, it means the fossil must have existed. This by itself is not evidence of macroevolution. Okay, so it doesn't mean the fossil proves that this kind of animal became extinct because it evolved into another kind of animal. That is not proven. The only evidence of macroevolution is if you find the fossils of different developmental stages of the same life form. Okay, so basically what I said here, that you must be the same kind of fossil, or rather the fossil that shows the development of, let's say, a monkey evolving into something similar like monkey and slowly more and more human-like. Okay, it must show that, and not just from monkey suddenly became human being, and you convince us this is called evolution. That is not correct. Okay, so it must have the different developmental stages. Then we know it's scientifically macroevolution. But what evolutionists will do is they'll just point to the fossil records here, and you see they call it evidence. But they have not produced transitional stage fossils as evidence of evolution of any kind of species to a different form, to a different life, different animal. Okay, so they make you conclude that within the changes of the same kind of animal, all those changes, they make you believe that it will become a different animal. But there's no evidence. So here is what one scientist says, Stephen Jay Gould: the evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks. Yeah, so just now the tree of life, that's what he's saying, the evolutionary trees, the trees of life, have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches, so only at the last part. The rest is inference. Okay, the rest, they are making you infer, which means however reasonable, they are not the evidence of fossils. Okay, so this is how an internet evolutionist will talk. With all these fossils, they say, we have the fossils. Yay, we win. It's evolution. Okay, they just have the fossils and they say evolution is correct, they win. But the actual evolutionist, so this is a picture of Stephen Jay Gould. The extreme rarity of transitional forms. Okay, you'll notice he says extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as a trade secret of paleontology. Okay, so it's something that for us as common people, we don't know. It's a trade secret. Evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches, just now what we said. Okay, the rest is inference. And no matter how reasonable, it's still not evidence of fossils in transition. Okay, so you see, proponents of evolution, they use the existing records of all these true fossils to make people think evolution is proven by science. So there's a big jump, but we are the ones that take the suicidal jump to think that they are correct, when actually they haven't proven anything. There's a big drain in between this animal into a human being. There's a big drain of logic that we jump over. But the fossils records are used to make people assume there's evidence of all the innumerable transitional evolution stages that will bridge the gap. But in reality, there's either no or rare, like he says, extreme rarity, either no evidence or rare evidence. Comparative anatomy, so they will use parts of the human and the ape to compare and says organisms that have similar anatomical structures are related to each other and share a common ancestor. And then they say human and chimpanzee's dental structure. So they say, oh, similar, you see? So our ancestors are the same ancestor. That's how they make you jump, commit mental suicide, scientific suicide, by assuming that something similar is therefore we came from the same ancestor. So this is another strategy to make people believe in evolution. They highlight comparative similarities. Okay, they compare certain things in the human body, and then they will say, okay, you see, this is how we came from the same great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Yeah. So again, there are no transitional fossils. They just tell you similar. So our ancestors are the same. To scientifically prove the developmental stages, no transitional fossils from ape evolving into man. Evolutionists are still looking and still hoping to find, okay? They are hoping to come from monkeys. Okay, so here's an illustration to show how they are nonsensically wrong. Fact or fiction? I also used to think margarine is one molecule away from plastic. And you might have read this email sometime back, or if it's still circulating, what's the real deal? Email is full of scary statements that if you put a tub of margarine outside, it won't decompose because it's nearly plastic. And there's this dietitian explains, when we examine the chemical structures of both materials, it is plastic and margarine, it's easy to see why someone would suggest this. Margarine has a similar chemical backbone structure to plastic. So it's quite similar, but the same can be said about butter or any fatty acid present in the human body. Many varied substances share similar chemical properties, but even the slightest variation in molecular structure can make a world of difference. Okay, so this is where, bottom line, this is not true. Okay, when you eat margarine, you're not eating something close to plastic. Human beings are only a couple of DNA links away from chimpanzees, but it doesn't make us the same. Okay, so there you go. Just now they compare and say, oh, similar. You see, actually it's very different. But they say, oh, we come from the same great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. But down here it tells you, even only a couple of DNA links away doesn't make us the same. So the fact is, one molecule of difference makes a whole world of difference. Don't let evolutionists make a monkey out of you. Okay? Don't let evolutionists make a monkey out of you, saying, oh, the DNA is very similar, so we actually share the same ancestors. Margarine is one molecule away from plastic and shares 27 ingredients with paint. Okay, so you're not eating paint and you're not eating plastic when you eat margarine. Okay, this one we will look at another day. Okay, our time is up. All right, shall we pray? Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for your truth, that whether it's the Bible or whether it's science, is up to us to explore, and we can see, Lord, for ourselves the evidence, the reality of how true theory of evolution is, and we can also explore the truth about Bible creation. And so, Father, we pray, Lord, that you give us that patience and the perseverance to explore truth objectively, to know it for ourselves, so that we're not deceived and we're not convinced by half-truths, accurate information that is mixed with what people come up with in order to convince us of something that is not correct. Thank you, Lord, for our intelligence and our common sense to be able to reason and to discover truth for ourselves. We praise and thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.